Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 168 with Richie Beretta. Sorry about missing a week there. I was traveling in America for the first time since the pandemic with my family, and things got just totally out of hand. I've never traveled with two kids before, and it was the most exhausting thing I've ever done. So I am sorry about missing a week there, but now you know that I am a human being. Nevertheless, speaking of New York, my conversation with Richie was amazing. He is a fellow New Yorker, and as you'll hear, he's got a lot of that New York attitude and things to talk about and say. So I think you're going to dig hearing it. We talked about so many things, including Paul McCartney's bass tone. We talk about recording on his dad's tape machine and then eventually to Pro Tools. We talk about how recording is stopping and capturing a moment in time, which truly fascinates him. We get into the woes of pop culture and his discontent over art becoming content. We talk about his quest for authenticity. He also talks about how listening to music is more enjoyable than making music. We also get into mixing versus producing, his approach to bass tone and his chain, backing off on compression, what he still gets out of analog gear, being true to your taste in music, and everything in between. I really love this chat, and I think you will too. So with all that to say, here's my chat with Richie Beretta coming up right here on Secret Sonics. Hey everyone, if you're a music studio professional who wants to build deeper relationships with better clients, former guest of the show, Carl Bonner, has created some free educational resources for you. The link is in the show notes, so go check it out. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Richie Beretta. Richie is a music producer and mixing engineer based out of San Diego, California, originally hailing from Queens, New York. So we are both native New Yorkers. Yeah. Richie and I recently connected online. I invited him on this show, which he's graciously agreed to do. So with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Richie.
Thank you, Ben. It's great to finally talk to you. I'm stoked. I'm stoked to be hanging out with you. Virtually.
Totally, and we've been schmoozing for a while.
Yeah.
I should have pressed record from the very beginning, but here we are.
That's okay.
Yeah, but you were about to tell me a little bit more about your background. We're actually both New Yorkers, and we're both bass players.
Yeah, that's right. See, I saw that you have the was it Hofner, right? You have a Hofner or the Epiphone?
That's an Epiphone behind me.
Still good.
Yeah.
Still good.
It's great. I only use the front pickup. I don't use the treble pickup. It doesn't help.
Nice.
It makes things worse. There's some phasey issue.
Does your bass have the? Is it like the first version of the 500 one, like with the two pickups like that are close to the bridge, or it's like one bridge one?
Yeah, it's like the classic Paul McCartney style, I guess, array. But I don't use the treble one, and it's not as hollow as the Hofner, the Epiphone.
My dad. I always wanted a Hofner. Paul McCartney's like my idol. Right.
Same, yeah.
I just always wanted a Hofner, and my dad was like, you don't want a Hofner, you want a Rick. That's the Paul sound that you really like. This was when I was a kid, when I was like learning bass. I would basically like just be playing along to Beatles records, and I really liked a lot of the stuff that was on Revolver. I loved Rain. I think when I heard Rain, that bass line blew my mind. Like I could tell you exactly where I was when I heard that bass line for the first time. I'm like, Dad, I want to get. I was playing like fucking. I bought an Epiphone bass. My dad bought it for me. It was an Epiphone metal bass. It had like this triangle pointed headstock. It was terrible. And that's the bass that I learned on. My dad was like, "Nah, you don't want a Hofner. You want a Rick. It's the Rick sound. It's the Rick sound, or a jazz bass." He kept telling me Paul played a jazz bass. And he did on White Album and a handful of other joints on Abbey Road, but like that's not the Paul sound, No,
the jazz bass is definitely not
the Paul sound. So, as through my formative years and being acquainting myself with tone, I realized it was much more than the bass that got Paul that sound. The strings were nylon and but I always still wanted a Hofner. And then, dude, my father fucking gets a Hofner for himself, right? I remember he buys a fucking Hofner for himself, one of those like vintage reissues, and I was like, Pop, you don't even play bass. What do you even do? He's like, no, you know what? I kind of wanted to get all the Beatles guitars, so he got like a Rick, the short scale John Lennon Rick, and then he got a 12 string, like for the George Harrison, red sunburst 12 string, a semi hollow body, and then he got a Rick, and then he got the and then he got a Hofner, and I'm like, I was like, all these years you told me not to get a Hofner, you get a fucking Hofner, and I played it, and I plugged it into an amp and played it, and I was like, oh, I love this fucking thing, dude. And I would always ask him, like, hey man, can I borrow it? Like, I'm gonna track something for somebody, and I really like to, I really want this tone. He's like, oh man, you got a whole 100 basses. You don't need this Hofner. I was like, come on, man. He would never let me borrow it. And then one year for Christmas, it was like, time to exchange gifts. He's like, Rich, your gift is under the couch. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Under the couch. And it was like, he just gave me his Hofner. And that's the one thing hung up in the other room. And dude, I use that bass on like the most random records. Like I've used it for hip hop joints. The bass, oh man, it's thick. It's thick. Good.
But the mid-range also cuts in like such a nice way, right? It's not like a P bass, which is like an aggressive mid-range or like
It has like that pop. It's almost as if you like pluck the string, but you don't have to pluck the string. Like it has that forcefulness, that forward excursion that you would get if you pluck the string, and it's there. Yeah. Even though it's really thumpy. I think it's a brilliant bass. So
it's the right mid-range. I don't know. It's like I don't know. It's like the mid-range I was always looking for, and I didn't know I needed it until I had like that kind of a
for hip hop and reggae. It's beautiful, and if you distort that motherfucker, it's beautiful. It's like a highly underrated bass. I know it's Paul's bass, so it's like the most overrated, underrated bass. Does that make sense? Like the Beatles, they're the most overrated band, but they're still the best. I mean, I don't care what anyone says, but fucking, it's just the truth. But they are the most, because who they are. They're the most overrated band. But that's because their reputation is insane. But as musicians and even if you're into the recording arts, like that is the band to study. Like,
oh yeah, I'm sure you've read the Jeff Emmerich book.
Oh, 100 times. I think I've given that book as a gift to like 5 people. Like, it's so good. Yeah. I love that book.
Yeah.
He followed me on Instagram. That was like I don't know why. And I
think he followed me also.
I don't think it was him. Like, I think it was like, his social media manager. But I remember getting a thing one day, the notification that
was it around AES of 2017?
I don't remember. I just remember I told my dad, and my dad was like, whoa, that's amazing. And I was like, yeah. And then I DM'd him, and I was like, are you really him? And he like gave me a winky emoji, and I was like, yeah, that's how I know it's not him, because Jeff Emmerich would not know what a winky emoji is.
Instagram is. Yeah. So may he rest in peace.
Yeah, may he rest in peace, man. That guy was a real genius.
Yeah, total legend. Genius.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to you for a second.
Okay.
I always like to interview people, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background. So I know you're a bass player. You're from New York. How did you get into the whole recording, producing, mixing thing? All the things you do today.
It's been with me since I was a kid. I was really lucky. So my dad was a musician way before I was born. He was in a band in the 70s that had like a kind of a culty following. He got signed to RCA through a small record label called Family Records, which was the record label. Basically, it was my father and Billy Joel were the two main artists. And this guy, Artie Rip, was the manager. Brooklyn guy, too. If you ever want to go down a rabbit hole of music history, Google Artie Rip. I mean, what he did with his money, I mean, he's a crook, but he also invested in like anime. It was pretty nuts. But anyway, my dad had a bunch of recording equipment from his recording, from his music days. He still recorded demos at the house, and I took an interest in it just because I was very fascinated with the archival process, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm fascinated that you could press record, and what you do during a moment in time is captured forever.
Yeah.
And you can go back and listen to it, not just immediately, but years and decades, and the memories that it will conjure up, you can place yourself in that point in time. And I became just infatuated with that phenomenon. It was something that was separate from music. I mean, I grew up playing drums. My dad put drumsticks in my hand at like literally as soon as I popped out of the hospital. And then, he made me a little Ringo Starr kit, and instead of like the Beatles that said Little Richie. Dude, I still have my drumsticks. I think they're over there. Like he cut drumsticks in half so I could like play them. So I've been playing music for a long time, but like when I saw my father record shit, it was just like, it was like magic. Yeah, and that feeling stuck with me. It still does, man. I open up Pro Tools, I still get the feeling of like, I get to, I'm going to experience this. It's the weirdest thing. It's like, it's a high that just never wore off, and I don't need a large dose to feel it. It's like every time I open up Tools, or that's the tape machine that I learned on, this TIAC 3340. Like I took it with me.
Wow.
And my dad would let me record, like bullshit on the piano. But he wouldn't let me touch the TIAC because when it rewinds, it could chop a kid's finger off. So that was off limits. So I never touched that. But right when he was still like interested in music technology. We're talking like early 80s, right? And Yamaha put out a 16-track mixing board coupled with a cassette recorder, a multi-track cassette recorder, and you'd put a magnetic piece of tape on the B side of a blank cassette, and you'd be able to simultaneously record 4 channels, left, right, left, right. He let me, he was gracious enough to let me, we're talking as a kid, like 5 years old, like let me like fuck around. That's really what I was doing. And just like record stuff and then record stuff over it. And I remember the first time, playing some chords on the piano and then recording over that. I mean, I wasn't making any, I wasn't making anything cohesive or anything like that. Like it wasn't good by any means. It was just, it was a kid screwing around. But the feeling that I knew what I was, knew what was going on and I couldn't explain it was very cool. It was very cool. That was like and then I would sneak in as I got older, like, once I started bass, I think I wanted to start layering, making demos. My dad had a drum machine and I wanted to start making music, and I would sneak in and use the TIAC and learn how to cut tape. And then I would be like, Dad, look what I learned. I cut tape. And he'd be like, he's like, I told you not to touch this shit. I get in trouble. But then I think he realized that he may have a studio assistant on his hands because he was very, he had a 9-to-5 job at the time, but he was still very interested in recording music, and I would just record them and edit the tape, and it was fun. It was a fun thing, and it was very special. And then I started doing it for myself, and then I caught the itch to perform live, and I kind of stopped paying attention to like recording, and I just got into bands, and then we go to studios to record, and I kind of understood what was going on, even though the tape machines were a little bigger and all the demos we were doing were terrible. I was in like 1,000 bands and like none of them were good. But until I was like, okay, I've been in enough bands where I could start my own band. And I started my own band and we went to a studio, and this was in 1999. And at the time, I've also, like in high school, we would get like cracked versions of like Cakewalk or Fruity Loops, or what was the other thing that I was using? SoundForge? That you could do like multi-track recording with it. It was called, I forget what it was called though. What back in the day, what they called it. The reason why they were able to do it was like a name to the type of software. But anyway, for my first band, that was mine. We went to the studio in Long Island, and they were using Pro Tools, and I couldn't understand how he was plugging a guitar into the computer and getting it to sound like an amp. We were using Line 6's amp farm. You remember that, dude? Like, yeah. And I was just like, and then all of a sudden I caught the itch again. I was blown away. I was just like, how the fuck? And then I went back to my computer at home. I was at like a Dell. And I'm like, where's the guitar? I was like, dude, all I have is an 1/8" jack. Like, how do I? So then I went to Radio Shack, got a little converter and plugged it in. And I was like, but it doesn't sound like an amp. Like, I didn't understand how any of this stuff worked,
it's like barely, it's not even a DI.
Yeah. I mean, I probably blew, it was like a creative sound card, what was it? Sound Blaster or something? And then, so we kept going back to the studio, and like, the guy who owned the studio didn't even know what he was doing. He was just some rich dude that like whose parents bought him a bunch of recording equipment. But he had some solid stuff. I mean, he was working with that 88 IO. He had the Control 24 that you still see in like, some other studios. But like back in the day, that was like a $24,000. It was such a, like piece of equipment. Like now it's like it's like a boat anchor, But like I was blown away by it all, and I was just like, I need to do this. Like I need to do this. And then I was in Sam Ash. Have you ever been to the Sam Ash in Queens?
Yeah, of course. I've bought guitars there. I bought my a black Yamaha acoustic guitar there that I no longer have. But
so my last apartment in Queens, we lived across the street. We lived across Queens Boulevard. And, and that was the Sam
right
Ash.
It's like right next to the Jackie Robinson, right? That's
right. Yes.
Yeah.
I would go into. I think it was a freshman in college at the time, and I went into the Sam Ash, and I saw something that said Pro Tools on it for $500, and I was like, I knew how expensive it was, but I was like, how is Pro Tools $500? So I asked the sales guy, I was like, how is this so cheap? And they're like, oh, it's like it's missing parts and we don't know if it's working. And somebody, sold it to us. But what it was a Digio 1. Do you remember the Digio 1s? So like they were like before the M box. It was like a 1 unit rack mount thing, and you could change the faceplate. The converters in it were actually pretty solid, from what I hear. I mean, I couldn't tell you what a good converter was back then, but after talking to some people who used to work at DigiDesign, they were like, "Yeah, that was actually a solid box." I applied for a Sam Ash credit card and maxed it out, bought that stupid shit. So then I took it home. It was missing a cable, and I just want to illustrate how like ignorant I was to all of digital recording. It was a D-sub cable, right? What it was like a DIN cable, but it was a DigiLink cable. It was like the first DigiLink cable, but it was a pin out. It was 25 pin out. It looked like a printer cable. So I was like, oh, dude, I just go to Radio Shack, get a printer cable. So I go to Radio Shack, I buy a printer cable, and I'm like, I just beat the system. I'm gonna have Pro Tools for the price of a printer cable. And then I didn't fit, obviously, and then I was like, oh shit. And I read the manual, and it's supposed to come with a cable. So I called up DigiDesign and told them I bought something and it didn't come with a cable. What do I do? Can I buy a cable? And they were like, well, good news is that this thing is still under warranty, so we'll send you the cable. So they mailed me a cable. I plugged it into the little card that it came with, that you install into the computer, and it didn't work. It wouldn't work. So then I called up DigiDesign again, and I said, hey, I'm not getting any audio. And they were like, what's your, and they're like, oh, it's under warranty. If you just want to ship it in, we'll repair it and send it back. And I'm like, yeah. And I did that. And like, so after all that, 1 month later, mailing stuff back and getting stuff in the mail, I finally had Pro Tools in my, my room at my parents' house. And I would just record bands with it. I would take my computer, my Dell with a huge monitor and like, I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you what speakers I was using. Like, they were like $100 at Sam Ash. But I would take the setup. I would take the rig and go to like my friend's garage and set up and record their demos. I'd buy like the $75 drum mic pack, and like I bought Art had that company ART had these two preamps, and I just thought I was the shit. Like I didn't realize that this stuff costs a fortune. I thought like, oh, everybody does it. This is how everybody does it. And that's how I got into it. While still doing my own stuff in a band.
It was like this amazing naivety. You just
it was whatever. Definitely like you
didn't seem to suffer from like the imposter syndrome that most people suffer from.
I suffer from that shit right now, dude. But like back then, it was just like I felt like I was in an amusement park. Like it was fun.
When it's new, and you don't know better.
I didn't know shit. I didn't know. I didn't know anything, and I was just making demos. Some things were cool. I still have those sessions. Like I found my parents before they moved out of the house I grew up in. I found all my hard drives, and I went to a store and got them all on like a USB stick and All my sessions are there. Like all the plugins don't load because they're all cracked, like Waves plugins from like back in the. Hope I don't get in trouble. But I'm all legal now, Waves. So fucking leave me the fuck alone. But back then, yeah, I mean, it was all fucking shit off a LimeWire, and the plugins don't load, but the recordings are there, and it's it's fun. It's fun to hear them, and like I would have liked to see like what I did EQ wise because I had no understanding. I mean, I understood EQ because of being a guitarist and and a bassist, basically playing in bands and you fucking around with your tone is like it's your signature, and you're particular. And I think that every instrumentalist that plays through an amp knows about EQ. Right. I think everybody knows about EQ fundamentally
in a broad sense. Yeah.
Right. So
like what treble, mids, and bass are at the very least.
Right.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything. A friend of mine was going to SAE, and he was trying to explain compression to me, and he couldn't even really explain it. And then that's what discouraged me from dropping out of art school. After I went to Queens College, I went to Boston for Mass Art, and I was like, you know what? They probably don't teach you shit in these fucking schools. Like I'm just keep going. Yeah, it was just been like a journey of fucking around and finding out. That's literally how I learned. And I ended up getting a mentor much later on in my career, which has been nice, to have someone to talk to. But I am envious of those who like realize that their naivete fairly early on, and was just opted to either get a mentor or go to school for it. I do think because I grew up around it that that had some of its advantages too. I mean, I would say it's highly advantageous in this current music market because we're just surrounded by folks who don't appreciate the power of it all. The power of what a thoughtful arrangement, what a thoughtful chord progression, what a thoughtful mix, what a thoughtful anything. Something that's purposeful and meant to last. Like I was saying earlier on, when you press play, you're hearing what you did, at that point in time. Right. And to think that through before you hit record is a special thing. It's forget about being smart or being like highly calculated. I just think it's amazing to prepare to capture an event. I think that like those are the people that live in the present, that are highly aware of their emotions and how the world affects them and how they affect the world. And when you prepare for a moment like that, where it's going to be like, okay, what we do right now is going to be captured forever, especially now with digital, I don't think that's really done. I think people kind of build records from the outside in. It's like the way I see is my opinion, but the records that I tend to gravitate towards, and I use that as a barometer because I truly love listening to music. Like I don't listen to a record thinking like, fuck this artist, like this is going to be corny and you get ready to have a bad time. That to me is stupid. Like when you listen to it, you let your body tell you what's good, And I feel like if that sort of honesty before you press record, that sort of recognition that, okay, what we're going to do now is going to be captured. Let's show people how it is, and not sort of building backwards from the aesthetic into the context. So it's sort of like the core should be your context and the surrounding layers are content. It's the aesthetic where people build from the aesthetic in. They let the aesthetic dictate the context, which is like sort of like, to me, that's like making a movie poster before you make a movie. You know what I mean? Like, so
you have to have a song first. You have to have
you have to have an idea. You have to have a reason to say, let's stop time.
Right.
And then whatever happens will happen. It could be cool, it could be nuts. It could be super calculated. It could be like, all right, you know what, this aesthetic was influencing me, but without that sort of organic reason to stop time, you're just making content. And then that's where we are today. But that's where I feel like it's advantageous that I did experience all that, like, sort of pure just excitement, even though I wasn't doing anything good. It was like, but the excitement about it, the way to recognize the experience that I was about to have and to treat that with respect is something that I don't think is taught, regardless, whether you have a mentor or not. That I don't think is.
That's dope.
I don't think that's taught. But that's why I love doing these talks and shit, because I don't think that people don't realize it because they're ignorant. I just think that no one talks about it because it's not really sexy, or it's not like, glamorous, but it is. It's cool, man. It's fucking cool to fucking say, oh shit, we're going to stop time right now and make something rad that's been bubbling up inside of me, and now we're going to have a record of it. Like, that to me is fucking cool.
Yeah.
And then like 10 years from now, you don't know what the hell how that's going to change someone's mind, or it's almost a shame when you make a song just for the sake of making something, because you could be missing an opportunity to have a pretty powerful experience, not just for you, but for the person that may be listening to it.
Right, you never know where it's going to
go
down the road.
You never know, and it's a very special thing. It's a very it's a really wonderful thing that I'm happy to do. Yeah, I think people definitely. I wouldn't know. I'm going to be honest. Like, I wouldn't know. I stopped working in that circle of music about 5 years ago, in terms of like pop music and stuff that was meant for mass consumption very quickly. It sort of burnt me out. I don't even know if I have a lot in common with the audience, and that's sort of where I found it hard to work. It became a job, and the thing was like, I did this because I didn't want to have a job that felt like a job. So I found myself distancing myself from anything that was like, so if someone came to me and they're like, they had a goal of mainstream listenability, and the amount of work that I can do for them is very little. Most of that comes in a boardroom with a lot of dollars, and sometimes I even feel like today the producers and the engineers that work in that space, they're sort of in denial about how much money and planning goes into getting a release taken in, because maybe they don't want it to seem, they still want to make it seem like magical, because the reason why you get into making music is because I would hope you're aware of how powerful music is in terms of how it transcends sound. It changes your mood, changes your emotion, makes a difference in your life, makes a difference in others' life. It can be highly influential. I don't think they want to use it, but like, we can't, we'd be kidding ourselves now if we were to say that about the stuff that's, being advertised. I don't want to say all music. I feel like that's where people lack specificity. Like, you can't make a broad statement like that, because I think on the other end of that coin, there are people doing cool shit right now. I don't know if it's ever going to trickle up to the mainstream. The mainstream has been saturated with ideologies and buzzwords, and where you fit in pop culture, and pop culture is just like out of control. So, and I deal with it right now. Most of my clients, by choice, are independent artists that want to have a lengthy career doing things on their own terms. And because I have a history in songs that were meant to be consumed, rather than preserved. I know how the system works, and I'll help them with their publishing, and I'll get them on, calls, and I'll get them on, email chains with distributor sales teams that pitch to the DSPs. And I could tell you, I could tell you right now that, like, the amount of leverage that the bigger, more popular, the highly consumed artists or acts have over these DSPs is astronomical compared to there is no leverage for an independent artist. I'm doing it right now with an artist that she makes them and does great on her own. We've been releasing music on our own through DistroKid. We set up her own publishing company. She does great. Tons of views on TikToks. Even though I don't really think that any of that stuff matters in the grand scheme of things, because there's always going to be a different platform. But if we were to talk, dumbass A&R language, yeah, TikTok metrics look good. Socials look good. Plays look good. A lot of unique listeners a month. Engagement looks good. All that stuff. But what's the difference? Huge ass budgets. That's the difference. So, for her to we're right now, not it's, we're trying to be as collaborative as possible with a new distributor. And it's very blatant that these distributors, which makes no sense to me, because it's in everyone's best interest that songs do well if you're putting records out, but they go to where the money is. They go to where the money is, and if you're lucky or unlucky, depending on who you talk to, enough to work on these big records, yeah, there's a little bit of magic that's lost, in my opinion. I don't want to negate anybody's happiness or whatever they think success is, but I moved away from that world pretty quickly. I used to DJ. I did that on accident. That helped get my foot in the door in terms of my production, because I was doing a lot of remixing of popular records and then having them chart. And I would also, and they were at once bootlegs, but then the major artists started calling. Like I would do, I think the biggest one I ever did was a couple of Beyonce remixes, and that led to more mix work. That led to more production, but it was all in that world. And it's not really about genre for me. I listen to everything.
Yeah, I listened to stuff you sent me. It was like all kinds of genres, It's all over the place.
Yeah, thanks. I can't kind of stick to one thing, because I genuinely listen to a lot of things. Like I know the semiotics of different genres well enough to make it. But so I had no problem, making pop music and mixing for it, but just the things that mattered to me about music weren't being recognized by the artists and the clients and producers and the labels. Forget it, dude. I don't even know how they get paychecks. Like, I don't understand how it works anymore. So I sort of was like, if I can make a living doing this, it has to mean something. If I could, you definitely won't be able, can't see it all on camera, but my studio is pretty extensive. And it was everything was funded by the artists that I worked for. Some of them big, some of them small, but most of them were independent, and if I could make it work for myself, I could teach an artist how to make it work for themselves on their own terms. And I think that if there were more artists like that working, engineers could be themselves, the ecosystem would be a little different. Instead of talking about, who had the best mix, on Spotify, on their top 100 most viral songs, we could be talking about something else, like, what artist made the most difference? What makes you the happiest? Like the goals that they have in mind in terms of these commercial artists, I just don't I don't really find value in them at this point, because you're conditioning the artists that come after you to treat their art like content.
You're making a product instead of music,
Right. And it's expensive. That's the other thing, is that people don't realize, most engineers, look, it's just, again, I don't want to seem like I'm shit talking anybody, but a lot of the business, they don't, the money doesn't come from their own pocket, so they don't really understand the value of how much it costs to make a song the way that they're actually making it, it's expensive. So for an independent to compete against that, they got to really invest and dig.
Yeah.
Like to then say that, like, okay, cool. Now you to appease an algorithm, you have to have another thing like this in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? You're going to give the audience 6 weeks to latch onto your record, and if that's all you get, you know what I mean? Like, we were just talking about how this is a snapshot in time and it means something. The expiration date's 6 weeks. It doesn't make sense to me, So I'm not saying that it's wrong or right. It could be right, but if it is right, I don't want to fucking do it. I'm not making that judgment. I just know what I want, right. And I know that there are other artists out there that agree with my sentiment. And there are engineers.
It's like everyone's talking about, like, VR and the metaverse and all this shit. It's like, but that's not a reality I even give two shshits to live in. You know what I mean? Like,
We're already living in La La Land. You know what I mean? Like, the reality isn't even fucking real. We're gonna have a virtual reality. Plus, like, didn't that guy go bankrupt? Like, didn't he bankrupt himself? He lost like $100 billion or something like that trying to come up with like VR. Like, no one cares, dude. We've lost touch. I mean, we've lost touch as a society in terms of, I don't want to get too like philosophical. But like we really,
we're already there, man.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess because we're musicians, so we feel we feel it. But we've lost touch with how to communicate emotionally and like how to just communicate in general. It's like to people and like have a conversation where it's not like, I don't know, dude. It's very strange. It's a strange time to be alive. I will say that. But the hopefulness that I find is in the independent artists. Especially in San Diego, man. San Diego has a very, very cool independent music scene. I mean, just like, I knew it.
How'd you end up in San Diego specifically from New York? Like, that's like a...
Oh, man, it's kind of random, I guess. But I'm not really a big fan of LA. And this is no disrespect to any of my homies in LA or anybody that may be listening that is in LA. It's not the people. It's just being a New York boy for your whole life. Like, the thought of moving to an LA after being burnt out in New York is frightening. So like, it just wouldn't work. But a cousin of mine moved here, and I was here for the first time in 2019 for NAMM. Well, and NAMM is in Anaheim, but I was visiting my cousin. I was doing like a...
Yeah, it's not so far, right?
Yeah, it was like a 2-hour drive, hour and a half drive. And I loved it. I just loved the weather and the food. Like, and I just thought it was like a nice kind of, it's sleepy, but not sleepy. It's its own thing. It's not really like a diet LA. But I didn't know about the art and music and culture scene. I just liked the vibe. But a year later, I started working with an artist. And then we started dating. And she's from San Diego. And, we would go to visit her parents here, and she wanted to move to LA because she was kind of burnt out in New York too, and she's an artist, so she thought that that's where she should go. And I was like, you don't want to go to LA, you don't have to go to LA anymore. It's not 1994. There's always like this stigma that you got to go to like a big market city, but it's just so saturated, and you get devalued in a big city.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's not what it seems. You really do get devalued because everyone's doing it.
Although it's a great place to meet people, right? Like, there's no better place to go to meet people in LA.
I feel like there's a trade-off. And if you're somebody like me, like I wouldn't consider myself an introvert, but my tolerance for small talk was never really high. That could be the New Yorker in me. So even in New York, when I was like, rubbing shoulders with people in order to like, shake hands, give a business card, get to know people. I mean, I just was like, okay, look, we know what we're doing here. What do we need? 10 minutes for this? Cool. I'm Richie. You want to work? Let's go. Fucking come over to my house. I'll make you a bowl of pasta. All good. Like, I don't need to talk to you about every fucking thing. I just met you. Like. And I you're thinking the same thing too. Not you specifically, Ben. I could talk to you for hours. You're a New York boy, so it's all good. We're cut from the same cloth. But like, you know what I mean. Like when you're going to do some networking, and it's just like, bro, how much networking do I got to? And then all of a sudden, grind culture took over, and it turns into this whole fucking like, yo, bro, if you're not talking to 4 people, if you're not giving permit, who's quantifying this fucking shit, dude? Like, you know what I mean? It's almost like the lunatics have taken over the asylum. Like all of a sudden now there's a prescription for networking. If I didn't spend so and so amount of time on something, I didn't properly network. Do you even know what it is that I do? You know, you got like the Gary V's of the universe fucking telling you. Meanwhile, that fucking guy, his parents own the fucking wine shop. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like everybody has their own fucking journey. Success isn't linear. If you fucking love what you do, stay committed and be consistent. That's all I can fucking tell you. You know what I mean? There's really nothing to it. Be honest. You want something? Ask for it. What are they going to say? They're going to say no. You know what? You didn't have it to begin with, so you're going to wake up the same way the next morning, on to the next thing. What I've found is that like grinding and being so particular about fucking relationships with fucking everybody, even with clients, this whole like fucking making meaningful relationships with your clients through what? Through conversation or through your expertise as a practitioner? You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather somebody be like, man, I love Richie because that motherfucker gives a fuck about what my music sounds like, and he takes the time and he cares about it. Oh, cool. Did you ever have a conversation with him? Nah, I never talked to the fucking kid. Like, you know what I mean? But that doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to hang out with me. But I love your music and I'm going to do my best. Like, that's how you fucking build a relationship. It's not through fucking, empathetic, strategic conversation. Like, we've turned the business into like, this like live light, shit. Like fucking, it's like a yoga fucking routine at this point where it's like, hey, look, man, we make records, and we make records for a reason. Everybody works for a reason. What's your reason? You acknowledge your reason. Your reason is to make hits, to make fucking shit that charts on Spotify every day. God bless, dude. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying that's your path, I guess what we may be touching on is sort of a my distaste for how commercial or like excessively consumed music is considered. There's a barometer for what like a good record or a good mix, especially a good mix. Because, dude, like Post Malone records, like I'm not saying they sound bad, but anyone can mix it. It's not gonna make a difference, dude. He's gonna sell records. He's ensconced in pop culture. It doesn't take a genius to like know, like if somebody's on, they're on. That's why people want to be on. Like, I mean, if you talk about rappers, like, when I get on, it's a rap. Like, because they know they're hitting the wave. When they're adopted by pop culture, you're on. You could do no wrong. What do you need? You serving to mix every fucking record? No, you could pay, Lander could mix the fucking record. Still gonna chart, dude. Still gonna fucking chart. But like, I'm not saying like, 'cause I know because he's a popular target and like, I think he's a fucking amazing mixer. Fact, this is how you know Ex Machinas are good fucking speakers. I used to be a Serban hater, and I'm not ashamed to say it, just because, I'm punk rock. So if everyone likes something and somebody's popular, your knee-jerk reaction is like, that's probably bullshit, And I never really got it. And also, I heard, a lot of other, my colleagues would be like, yeah, I don't fucking hear it, whatever. But then I got these Ex Machinas, and it turned my whole fucking world around. Records that I thought sounded good, didn't sound good. And I was like, oh, you know what? Let me listen to a Serban record. And I listened to it, and I was like, this motherfucker knows his shit, dude.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Dude. I mean, the balance is perfect. He's doing a great job. I think that's if you could teach a master class in like what to do for a modern pop record in 2022 and beyond, it's what he's doing. He's not obscuring the artist one bit with any of the bullshit that fucking, mixers want to talk about, big bass, small bass, fucking, I don't know, dude. He mixes the record and you hear the artist. You don't hear him.
Vocals loud, mixes dense.
Yeah,
it hits.
And it hits, and it does its job for as long as it has to. And that's, fucking, how do you complain with that? Yeah, I don't understand. How do you criticize that? There's not, he's killing it. Like, and then you get like,
for a reason.
Exactly. Now I have, there are mixers that I love that I just fucking love here and there plating. But sometimes I'll say like, you know what? They're doing their thing, but don't work for the record. You know, it goes both ways. It's not like for us to use those techniques and pay attention to those things. If we're paying attention so specifically that we could pick out, fucking, people criticize. I don't like. I'm not going to. From the rest of this podcast, I'm not saying any other names because I don't want to look like a hater, and I'm not. But like, I talk to a lot of engineers, and everybody talks and whatever. But like, they'll mention like somebody's technique, and they'll like be like, oh yeah, all that person does is X Y Z, and then they call and then they make their money. I'm like, did you not listen to the song? I mean, I'm not the first thing I do when I listen to a song is listen to the song. Like I can't. I'm not deconstructing their patches in my head. I can't do that because then when I go to work, what am I thinking about? Patches or the song?
Yeah.
If you're a mixer that's mindful of the music, you're going to do a better job than somebody who's fucking amazing at working an SSL or amazing at being an in-the-box mixer. Or that's just the case. I don't care. I don't care what anybody says. That's the one thing I'll stick to. It's like, if you give a fuck about the music, you're going to do a better job. If you're honest. And you really care about it.
I think it sounds like you're just like on a quest for authenticity in like the work that you do, the artists that you're working with.
Yeah.
And you're just listening to the music. Like you're not, I'm sure you're technically minded, but like the music comes first,
I am technically minded, and probably to a fault. But I've spent probably most of my time, my learning time, trying to forget that I know all the stuff that I know. Just because it makes no difference, man. It really makes no difference. It's like
learning all the music theory just to throw it out the window to write a good song,
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, music theory, I would say music theory is a little different because music theory, will name the bricks in the wall. Music theory will tell you, what's mortar and what's concrete and what's cement. And so if you're looking to build a structure, these are the things that, these are the materials that you need. Whereas the technicality of a mix, aside from balance, I just don't know if it's important to keep in the forefront of your brain and also to criticize a song,
based on
based on it. I don't, because there's a ton, dude. I don't know what your musical background is in terms of like the stuff that you listened to when you were a kid. But when I was a kid, I listened to a lot of punk rock and a lot of underground stuff. Like I was hungry for it. Like I was hungry to hear things that were popular before they were popular. Like I wanted to see them as they were made. Like I loved good music, and I wanted to experience it like in its rawest form. So I was very excited. But some of the music, definitely I don't know if I would like this today, but a lot of the punk that I listened to, let's take Green Day, for example. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm a huge Green Day fan. I mean, probably they're my second favorite band, maybe because I grew up in that era. But like, if you've listened to Kerplunk, that album sounds like garbage. Same engineer, Jerry Finn, same engineer, than as Dookie. But the budget was $300 for Kerplunk and 50 G's for Dookie. Totally different sonics, right? Same engineer, totally different sonics. Songs are both equally good. And honestly, like I jump back and forth between what is the better record. I don't know. I mean, like Kerplunk is amazing. It got them that deal. And Dookie's just fucking one of the best punk albums ever made. Like
Dookie's amazing, yeah.
Oh, it's an incredible album. But it's bare bones. I mean, there's nothing slick there. They just capture the energy of the band.
It's just bass, drums, guitar, vocals, just loud and in your face,
Right, but there's a lot of I don't like using the word emotion or whatever, but like I will say it is emotional. But there is a lot of non-tangible things that's going on in those. Yeah. Same thing with Beatles records, same thing with Nirvana records, same thing with great pop records. Michael Jackson. Who's another who I like a lot? Tame Impala. Same type of shit with him. Like. A lot of shit going on that was like up here and not, on the fucking board or whatever, It's just like, let's fucking do something. Good pop records too. 1975, man. Another one, Their records sound great, but also, dude, very conceptualized. It's good stuff. It's when they're taking the time to do something. I'll even go so far as to say it's like Lizzo stuff. Like,
Oh, it's just great.
you know, like there's a lot of things that are like thought out, but you know, there's attitude there that's distinctly her. But then when you get to like, you know, like for example, Drake, like I have a love-hate relationship with Drake. A lot of people that know me know this. Like I like his music because it's like mindless. A million people write it. He's like, you know, the MC Hammer of our generation. But like it's garbage. You know what I mean? But it's fucking good. Like, but that's what it is. I'm not fucking dissecting it. I'm enjoying it. Like when I enjoy it, and if I don't fucking like it, it's like, you know, I'm not into it right now. You know, it's what it is. Like the barometer should not be where it stands in pop culture. Like all the shit like mixed with the masters. It's like, oh, good. Let's invite fucking so-and-so. They just did a hit record. Is that what makes a mix good? You know, that there's a lot, and take it from me, from somebody that, you know, worked on records, you know, worked with people that have sold a lot of records and streams. Let's just say streams that have gotten a lot of streams. It takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of, even for a good song, it takes a lot of money to get where you're at. And distributors they won't touch you unless they know you're spending on these records. Like this is something nobody talks about, and it's okay. They need to sell at that high volume. The teams are huge. People have to get paid. I'm not saying this is bad, or I'm not trying to like make a remark on capitalism or consumerism or any of that stuff. You know, that you can form your own opinion about it. But this is just the way it is. You know, we have to like, no one's seeing that. You know, no one's, and we're just talking about as mixers, like what plugin is going to give us the most emotion. What are you fucking talking about? Like, you know, like, yeah, listen to the fucking song. The song will tell you what you need to do, you know? And if it's in the cards, it'll do well. But as long as, like, you know, the artist is being themselves, they're true to it, they're fucking happy, you're facilitating their goal, you're facilitating your vision, you're not bumming them out, and you're doing your best, and hopefully you have a good pair of monitors and a nice listening environment, you're going to be fine. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. You don't, you know, whether you're in the box, out of the box, don't fucking make a difference. Like, none of that shit matters. It never would have mattered anyway. Some of the coolest records, like I hate diverting back to the Beatles, but you could teach a recording class on because they were limited. They were more limited than anybody.
Yeah.
Abbey Road, because it was owned by EMI, which is a government, you know, it was a government agency, they had to deconstruct, take apart their gear, put it back together, and rewrite a manual before you can even use it. They were using outdated, you know, equipment, making fucking, you know, strawberry fields. You know what I mean? Like fucking, half the song, and you know this, half the song was in a different key, and they had to make it work. That to me, man, that's magic. That to me is like, that song could not have withstood that edit if it wasn't good. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Some people think like, you know, a good mix has certain characteristics like, you know, big brolic bass or, you know, a wide stereo field or, you know, detailed vocals or nice top end or whatever, right? Whatever. That may not be good for the song, but because the song is good and you morph it that way, the good song can withstand your poor decision. And it's always going to be good. You know, it's so really about the music.
Our job is like very like, you know, periphery to what's going on really in an ideal world.
Yes. You know? Yeah.
Most music isn't mixed for mixers to listen to, right? Or like, you know, Steely Dan is the exception to the rule of like people that, you know, people listen to that because of like the aesthetic of the sound, and that's kind of the vibe of it or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the masses aren't listening to music like that, you know? They're just like, what do I feel right now?
I feel like jazz music and classical music is like mixed like that. You know, you want to hear the bow hit the string, you know, in terms of like any kind of string instrument, any bowed instrument. You know, you want to hear the air moving across the embouchure, you know, on a woodwind. Like it's magical if you think about it. It's an experience. But dude, those two genres are like the lowest grossing genres. You know, no one's listening to it. So it's like,
and also the truth is that mixes also these days are all over the place. If you listen to top 40, like there's stuff that sounds super high fidelity and there's stuff that sounds super dirty and distorted, and there's no right or wrong anymore really with all that stuff.
I think there is a right or wrong, and I think the right way is to do what the song wants and the wrong way is to do what you fucking, you know, what's going to get you YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I think. I don't know any other way. It should be simpler. You know, it should be simpler, and engineers should be helping each other out, and we should be talking about this type of thing. That's why I really applaud you for doing this and getting people to open their mouths, because it will reflect better on us as a community of music makers if we are, you know, at least all on the same page and unashamed of what we're doing, and also, you know, able to understand that success is not linear and everyone's goal is different, and it's cool, man. Like, why I don't want to homogenize. I don't want people to think like me and homogenize. I like music too much. Like, I like listening to music, you know, more than I like making it, and that's just because it'll always be that way, because that's what got me to make it. You know, I heard a record and I was like, fuck, I want to do this. And there's a completely different joy I get from making music. But when I listen to it, I'm in touch. I feel like I'm experiencing something. I'm lucky to be listening to something. It's even a bad song, man. I don't know what it is. Like, you know, I'll get impatient with a bad song. And when I say a bad song, I mean a song that I think is meant to be, you know, made for the sake of making something and not for the sake of making a difference, I guess. Which unfortunately is most music these days. But it doesn't speak to how well it was crafted, you know, or how good the people were making it. I've worked with some pop artists that are unbelievably talented, and they do not get to showcase an inkling of that talent because it's not part of the repertoire. To me, I feel that's shortchanging your audience, you know? Like, I was working on a project with a pop artist. She played me these demos, and they were all her. I didn't know she played piano, and it was amazing. I was just like, holy shit, dude, this sounds like Wings. Like, and she's a Paul McCartney fan. She was like, really? She's like, because I love Paul, and I was like, dude, this is amazing. She's like, yeah, it's a shame that I can't do this. And I was like, why not? And she was like, well, because, you know, my audience expects this. And I asked her a question. I was like, listen, does your audience, like, you know, do you feel like your audience gets you and like loves you? She was like, yeah, I have the best fans. And I'm like, they wouldn't support you if this is what you wanted to do? And she was like, you know, then I got to deal with the label shit, and I got to deal with this stuff. And I was like, whatever. I was like, yeah, I get it. You know, maybe it's not the path of least resistance, but it's very good. And, you know, she ended up putting out the same old stuff and it went nowhere. I went absolutely nowhere. And, like, I always wonder, I was like, what would happen? You know, what would have happened if she would have leaned in with the stuff that she... Because it had to have meant something, otherwise she wouldn't have shared it with me. Because we didn't have... this wasn't a person, this was a work relationship. So you wouldn't just show me something willy-nilly. You know, there was a reason for it. So, you know...
It's interesting. My pushback on all this stuff is like, just like, think about so many of the Beatles songs that they just wrote on a whim. You know, there's like, oh, we need to write a song. Let's write a song. They wrote a lot of their songs just like, oh, we need to write a song. You know. Yeah. But they were fucking good. You know. They were.
The only interjection I would make on that, it was just different times. I mean, the '60s were very, like, not just a time that was a hotbed for art and culture and music, specifically music technology. But also everyday technology. I mean, it was probably, I would say R&D was the highest it's ever been in the 60s. I mean, I wasn't born, you know, I wasn't there, but from the reading that I've done, I would say that probably the 60s were the most innovative of decades.
Wow.
In terms of the concentration of innovation, not what was capable. In terms of the being aware
Resources.
That we need to innovate, you know, being aware that we have to push ourselves.
We got to the moon in the 60s, you know?
Yeah, that according to some people, yeah. I mean, I believe we did, but some people don't.
Lots of crazy shit happened in the 60s.
I mean, from everything, from racial equality, you know, from racial equality, voters' rights, from political to pop culture, to technology, there was a lot of advancement done in the 60s. So, and I think there was also a lot of bullshit as well, but it seems to me, just from my reading, that people were much more forward thinking, and the audience were hungry. It all boils down to the audience. You know, they were hungry to hear. They wanted to be challenged. I don't know, you know, I could tell you that's not the case these days because the record industry has conditioned a certain, you know, type of audience member.
Yeah, but I don't know. Also, it might change. Like, I feel like so many young people have been living through such shitty times with the pandemic and now this war in Ukraine and Russia and all kinds of like upheaval and shit. And it's just, the world is a scary place. It's not the same thing it was, you know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Like,
for sure.
Like 2017 feels like a lifetime ago in terms of what was, you know, I just remember, like, you know, watching like Gary Vee, for example, like in 2017. Like, that doesn't seem like this lifetime. That was like a different world.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like that's why like guitars are coming back, right? Like, there's more grunge, there's more angst, there's more indie, there's more, you know, in the culture now. So I think things are shifting. And
I think so too.
And another thing about the '60s that I think about a lot is that, you know, music was the art culture of like the '60s, like, whereas today, or like, I don't know if it's still true, but like, let's say, you know, 6 years ago, like with like, you know, HBO and all these shows and you know, like, it was more of like a TV thing or long form TV thing, and now I don't even know what it is. TikTok, I'm not sure. But back in the '60s, music was the shit. You know, that was what everybody cared about. Everybody cared about music, and that's like that's why the Beatles happened when they happened. Like, they couldn't have happened in another decade and had the same mass appeal. Something
similar in the '90s. You know, the '90s, and that culture is coming as a revival now. You know, there's like a highly alternative revival, both in all genres are taking that sort of rough around the edges approach now. Which I think is cool. And I agree 100% what you said. You know, the newer generation is kind of fed up with all this nonsense. Like, they don't care about the fucking things that, like, you know, people cared about 10 years ago. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Yeah. You know, the things that like people glamorize and they adopt don't make sense in your everyday life in terms of you existing on this planet trying to maintain. Like, music is something that helps you maintain. It helps you cope. It, you know, it always has. There's something, you know, that even in highly commercial markets where things are consumed, people do find a way to extract the emotion out. I think that they deserve more of it, which is why I like to sort of live in this sort of space that I carved out for myself, where I can get to people early. You know, it's hard to have these conversations with A&Rs and people that are playing the game. It's very difficult, and it's also hard to have these conversations with engineers that are, you know, part of it. Like my mentor, he was complaining because one time he was like, you know, I don't get to talk to so and so anymore. Like, meaning one of his artists, one of his clients. He's like, I don't get to talk to so and so anymore. I got to talk to, like, you know, the A&R, the manager, the aunt, the uncle. And I'm like, you know, and then, you know, they want it out in like 2 days, but I don't hear from them until, like, you know, a day and a half. And I was like, well, hang on, man. You make celebrity music, dude. What do you want? You know what I mean? Like, play the game. You're doing all right. And then he's like, oh shit, celebrity music. And I was like, yeah. So what were you doing? You know, and it's all good, but like, that's the thing. It's like, that's sort of if I could make one critique about this whole, you know, ecosystem that we've sort of built for ourselves, I do find it a shame that the people, the artists, engineers, producers, whoever, the personnel get recognition based on, you know, their involvement with things that are sucked up by pop culture, the things that are heavily sold, you know. That's like saying, you know, the only good chef is somebody that works at a gourmet restaurant. Meanwhile, like, bro, I mean, I live down in San Diego now, you know, I'm like 20 minutes away from Mexico. Man, I went over there like a couple weeks ago on accident because the border is so fucking close, and like, I don't know my way around that I just ended up in fucking Mexico. And
next thing you know, you're...
Dude. Next thing you know, you're in Mexico. And I was like, all right, well, Mexico.
It was like Tijuana, right?
Right, yeah. And I was just like, let's just look around. And man, dude, the food there is just fucking on another level. It's just on another, and that's like my zen is food. So I like to cook. I'm an Italian boy. Like, you know, like I like to cook Italian food, really traditional with it. Like, and the way mixers talk about other mixes, I'll talk about people's Italian food. Like that's that's where I'll be a mensch. But like, everywhere else I try to be zen. But I was down there, man, and the food is just amazing. I mean, it blew. I've traveled all over the fucking world with music. Like whether I was touring as DJ or making a record with somebody in another country, and I've ate some pretty solid food. And this was just like being made in the side of a road by like, grandma with a huge cleaver chopping up fucking birria. Oh man. I took like a bag of it home. And when I crossed the border, like the border guard was like, what are you doing here? And I'm alone, white dude, alone in a car, coming from Tijuana. What do you think they're fucking thinking, And I'm just like, I just bought a bag of tacos, man. Like, and he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, here. Fucking big green bag, 20 tacos, because I could not like leave without them. I had to give some to my girlfriend. My girlfriend's half Mexican too, so like I wanted to be like, yo, what do you think? Because we're always like comparing and shit. Like the stuff here is it legit? As compared to like the real deal.
What did you think?
Oh man, we were both like, this is like San Diego's pretty close. I will say that, man. San Diego's pretty close. I mean, we're right there. It might as well be Mexico. But like, anyway, the point of that story is that like, there's so many different subsets of the job,
Right. There's a lot of us
excelling
doing
in one subset
indie shit.
Right.
Yeah.
So excelling at one subset is not the barometer. And in fact, like, I've worked on stuff that was made in the garage, and I've worked on stuff that was fucking recorded like, East-West. And like the stuff that's recorded with a big team where people are looking over it and working on it for months and months and months. By the time it gets on your mixing console, it's fucking almost done. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to fuck those things up. But like when someone like, tracks their shit in their fucking room with their homies and they want to compete with that, it's a totally different fucking thing, man. It's a totally different set of skills. And like, that's my one problem. I mean, it's not a problem. It's a shame. I feel like, I feel like everybody should be talking to one another.
Yeah, like people in the trenches are not getting the same cred as the people that are doing the big records.
Yeah.
But
especially those recording it. Like there's a guy in San Diego that just records a lot of local bands here, and like when I heard what he was working with, I was just like, God damn, how does he do it? Like like. This is not bad. Like, how do you fucking, how do they do it? And then the bands will come, here, and they'll just be like, we gotta sound like this. And I'm like, yo, dude, first off, listen, you sound good. Like, you're not that far off, but they think they are, and it's discouraging because what are they looking at? They're looking at the same barometer that everybody else is. Another reason why I moved here is because there is a hotbed for like independent music here. I felt it would be valuable to them if there was like an advocate where they'd be like, no, you're doing a good fucking job. Just get, we got to do X, Y, Z now. We can compete. It is possible. You can do it. Like, and it's going to be cooler because you actually give a shit. The stakes are lower. So you're doing it for what? You're doing it for emotional gratification at an honest level. You know what that means? That means someone's going to connect to it. I mean, you're more guaranteed to have an emotional connection if the stakes are low, then being like, okay, well, what sound is hot right now? Okay, this sound's hot, so we got to go to this producer because he's doing it. All right, cool. No one knows each other, Whenever I work on like a bigger record, and by bigger I mean like something that is meant to be more commercialized, I'm getting files from everywhere on the globe. That Dylan Francis record, I was getting fucking snare drums from London and stuff from him, and then another, vocals were coming from a producer out in Miami, and everything was all over the place, and it was this big project, and that isn't even that I wouldn't even consider big, but he's an international personality, but like that's a hard thing to that's very hard too, and it's hard to stay hyper focused on the meaning that you're trying to get across, if there is one at all,
Yeah.
So I enjoy it when I get to get on the ground level of somebody that's trying to make a difference with them, not just with other people and their music, but within themselves, and it's a little more gratifying. And
nice.
There's a good seeing that evolution of like concept to final form is very satisfying. I think it's very satisfying for the artist as well as me, and so it's a nice little thing.
Nice. Richie, we've gone so hard on like the philosophy of what is art and what we can do, and different kinds of engineers and levels of commercial success, aspirations or lack thereof, or just yeah. But we have to get a little bit into the technical before
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Because there's a little Secret Sonics. We have to find out a little bit about the sauce.
Absolutely.
But you kind of like, glossed over all of my kind of questions, the beginning intro questions at the very least, with this long schmooze, which is great.
Yeah, I'm sorry if sometimes I can get a little long-winded, so
No, I love the passion, man. No, I'm just listening. I like listening. That's why I'm a podcast host, and I don't have to be the guest on my nice. own show every week, because I'd probably bore myself. I like to bring in other people and share knowledge and learn knowledge, and Yeah,
so I'm the same way. I like to, if it's something that I'm interested in, I just like hearing people talk when they're passionate about something. Yeah, I think it's cool. Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah. And that definitely comes across, man. So.
Oh man, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
For sure. Yeah, the passion for sure. Absolutely. So, I guess where do I start with like the technical thing? So you're mostly mixing, I think, these days, right?
I go through phases. Back when I was in New York, I was producing during the pandemic, believe it or not. I had a studio in Queensbridge that I loved, and that I do miss that place. And they would let me, they gave me the keys, and they would just be like, "You've got to bring someone in," while everything was shut down. But I've kind of for about a year or so sunk back on just mixing, because what I found was going on in New York was like people in New York were just trying to emulate something in order to chart, and it wasn't really appealing to me to chase that, so I wouldn't really offer my services as a producer unless I felt like I really was interested in like the song or the music or something about it had to and that wasn't
click.
So I mixed a lot. And I love mixing because I get to listen to music. I get to, and I don't mind if someone's trying to do something, if someone's trying to be the next Elvis or the next whoever. I like listening. I love mixing. It's fun. I was cool with it. But then when I got here, I really wanted to involve myself, and I just took on a bunch of projects, like probably more than I should have. But now I'm doing. I'd probably say an even amount. Some is mixing, some is production.
Amazing.
Probably 50-50, yeah.
Well, you work on so many different genres. How are you able to be successfully work on all these genres? Like, it's just because you listen to all this music, or is it?
Yeah.
It's just like you're familiar with all of it.
I'm familiar. It has a lot to do with my childhood, believe it or not. When I was a kid, Secret Sonics, man. It's actually fucking. That's what a coinky dink that I'm on this show. So I kept a lot of my musical taste a secret as a kid because I thought I'd be made fun of. So the thing that I would outwardly say that I listened to was like underground hip hop and punk rock and heavy metal. Like, I guess tough stuff. You know what I mean? Like, But man, I loved fucking pop music, specifically pop music from the 80s. And I also loved reggae. Well, I grew up in Woodhaven, which is right next to Richmond Hill, and Jamaica, Queens, which is technically it is Jamaica, Queens. This is a highly Caribbean area, so I grew up around that shit, and I love it's heavily influenced not just my productions but my mixes. In fact, that's my earlier days as a DJ and a pop producer. A lot of the stuff that I did with like Major Lazer and stuff was because of my knowledge of dance hall. And I just loved, man, I love music. I love, I don't like what pop music has become because it's about like ideology, but I love pop music. Like I think some of the coolest production in pop records, man. Even those early '90s cheesy Max Martin joints, man, they're fucking horrible because like, but they're good. Like you know what I mean? Like it's like Max Martin will fucking like he'll start the song and literally 4 bars later it's key modulation. You know what I mean? Because it's that typical fucking European pop shit. But it works, and all of a sudden you're still listening to the record. You know how hard it is to listen to a record that's cheesy, but forget you're listening to it, and then you're there, and it's all of a sudden it's the end of the song. That's good.
Yeah.
That's fucking, bro, that's chops, man. And that's why he's still working. But
still at it.
he's killing it. But you know, I love listening to joints that are hot, and it also I like the challenge of making something that isn't in my wheelhouse that I want to be my wheelhouse. You know, like I wish I could make this. Some things I'll give an attempt to it, and you know, I'll try it, and I have to be very honest with myself afterwards and be like, is this good? Did I do a good job? It's hard these days, you know, to delineate between my excitement for completing the task and not taking that for being good. Do you know what I mean? Like I get an exponential amount of excitement when I work on music or any kind of song, but I have to be able to tell the difference between am I excited because I did a good job or am I excited just because I worked, you know?
Yeah.
And they're not the same. They're not the same. So how do you
stay objective?
I gotta just turn my brain off. I trust in my taste in music. And I have to shut it off and listen to a song as if I was listening to a song. You know, your body doesn't lie. Your brain lies, but your body doesn't. So when you hear something,
that's a good quote.
Oh, thanks. When you do something, you know, when you hear something, you feel it, man.
Yeah.
You know, that's why that Drake, for example, and Serban, those two are my like guilty pleasures, and you know, that motherfucker, man, that guy, man, he balances a record like a son of a bitch, dude. God damn. And Drake is great. He's great at doing what he does, but fucking, bro, come on, man. You know what I mean? I'm not fucking listening to that shit all day, every day, but it's good. But, you know, it's not, you know, that's how I do it. I just sharpen that, you know, that tool, that ability to be like, look, this is not, you know, I don't know if I would consider this good, but it's good, you know, and that's how you know, like, that's how you know you're honest. Like, because your brain is like, bro, you're not a Drake fan, you know? Come on, you know, Serban, he makes pop music or whatever, you know. For example, I mean, this may be, you know, I don't even know. You may have to cut this out of the podcast. But for example, like Rick Rubin, everyone fucking loves Rick Rubin. Bro, I think that guy's the biggest sham. That dude is just like, that guy's like, he's a cult leader, man. Like, put me in a room, put anybody in a room with the Beastie Boys or Slayer or Johnny Cash or fucking, you know, Jay-Z. I mean, they're going to make good records, dude. It's all good. You know what I mean? You don't need like...
Yeah, but he keeps the vibe.
He keeps the vibe. Yeah, dude. Fuck that. Nah, not for me. But still, the records he makes, you know, they are good records. They're
very good records. They're great records. He's a very interesting guy. Rick Rubin.
Not for me. Yeah, I think like the mantras that he creates are just so like, bro, get a grip, dude. It's not about that, you know? It's like his whole like, do you want to have a good idea or the right idea? Like, bro, get a fucking life, dude. You know what you're doing. Like, you know what I mean? Like, come on. That quote, right. That's a buzz quote. You know, that's for Instagram. Those Instagram quotes where it's like, you know, where it's just like the italic text.
The Rick Rubin, yeah.
That's the fucking live, laugh, love sign of our generation, dude. Come on. You know what I mean? Like, you could buy that at Home Goods. It's all good. But the records are good. And I'm not trying to, you know, disrespect the man because he's just iconic and it's all good. But that's what I mean. Like, you know, and maybe
but I think he's really in touch with the music. Like, I don't know, from like the conversations I've heard him have with people, like he really like is listening. Like,
I think he has listening. A brain. Yeah, I think he knows what he's doing, and I think that he's like, I may have misspoke, you know, and I blame the New York boy. Because whenever I try and give an unpopular opinion, it usually sounds like I'm saying I don't like it. So I'll rephrase. He's good. He's definitely good. And he definitely knows what he's doing and he makes good records. But the Rick Rubin mindset that everybody fucking, wants to adopt and apply to their own projects. That's bullshit, dude. It's just bullshit. You know what he does? He fucking sits on a couch, he fucking texts and listens to the music. That's all you need to do. That should be the shit that if I were him, I'd be like, bro, look at me. Look at this fucking beard. I look at this. You see me with this beard and this fucking crazy haircut and these fucking biker glasses and I'm sitting here next to the Rolling Stones? Dude, you could do it too. You want to know how? You just fucking listen to the fucking song. That's it. That's it. And then I'd be like, you know what, bro? You were the fucking man. But you can't.
The yogi.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you start creating mantras and fucking, trying to quantify I think, is it quantifiable or inquantifiable? I don't know.
I don't know.
One of those words.
Probably unquantifiable.
Unquantifiable. When you try and quantify the unquantifiable, which is the fucking chemical reaction that happens, that triggers the emotional response, into being like, well, the first thing I do with my artists, I go and take a walk on my private beach and I fucking shut up, bro. Shut up. Like, that's what triggers that. I was just like, nah. No one has a private beach, buddy. You were a kid when you worked with Slayer. You did a good job. Were you working on a private beach then? When you did that fucking record with the Beastie Boys, bro, hip hop, that's like hip hop canon, dude. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Like,
yeah.
That's not something that you fucking take lightly. Or were you doing that? You know what I'm saying? Like, nah, dude, you were doing what you were doing. Talk about that.
Yeah.
It's not the
being
transcendent.
grimy,
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, but this could be also me as an ignorant New Yorker, because when we see something that's like, we're very skeptical people, so it's sort of like,
That's true.
So I don't know, it could be that. I don't have all the answers, Ben. I don't know what to tell you.
Rick Rubin, anyway, regardless of Rick Rubin, but there are a lot of ways to make records, and a lot of us are in the trenches working really hard and not just sitting on couches with a lot of budgets. So there's definitely what to be said about that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about bass tone, because I know you're a bass player, and I've heard some stuff that you've done, and you definitely have that, that punk rock bass tone thing down, as well as other bass tones.
Thank you, man. That's from one bassist to another. That's a pretty big compliment, man. I appreciate
For
you.
sure.
Thank you so much.
What's your approach to getting like that really big ballsy punk rock sound? Is it just the P bass with a pick, or what is it?
That's a start. Yeah. P bass with a pick. It's usually a recording thing. It's not so much a mixing thing. It's P bass into. I like to use a Ampeg SVT. I use a Kemper these days because I modeled all my amps, and fucking Kemper is just like a godsend. And the thing is, I used to hate recording bass because you got to record it loud in order to actually get it to sound good. You have a 300 watt, 1970s SVT Ampeg head. That you're gonna blow someone's house down.
Yeah.
Like, in order to get the sound, you hear it in the control room, man. It's loud. So that was one of the reasons I got the Kemper was like, okay, I just have to. I'll take it to a studio. I'll crank it. I'll do all my settings, and. So that's the amp I use. I had a B15 that I modeled too that I use sometimes. Like on reggae records, I'll use a B15. Even some garagey punk stuff I'll do on a B15. And a Fender Bassman. I got into that later on before I sold all my amps. The chain, I'm looking at it right here. The chain is an MXR. It goes into an MXR DI, but I like the distortion on it. So if it needs to growl, I'll get that. And then I have this RC bass booster pedal that because I'm sure you know this, when you distort bass, it's a form of compression, and you lose that low end, you lose that subharmonic.
Right.
That bass, it brings it right back. It could do other cool things too, like it also could distort, but I just use it to restore some low end. And then from there, I split it. I split into two Jensen DIs. Those are my favorite DIs for bass because of the transformer and the phase coherency. It's pretty much identical. So what you're hearing is the DI. What's going into the amp, especially if it's getting reamped, is the DI. And when you layer that DI with an amp, it's more or less phase coherent. It's
cool.
Pretty special box. So it splits, goes into two DIs. One DI goes into a preamp my 1084 into the Kemper and then into a distressor. And then the other DI just goes into the distressor. So both are getting compressed identically.
On the way in.
I like, on the way in. And I like, but the amp I may fuck with the amount of compression coming out of the amp just because the level may be different. But the distressors more or less do the same thing.
How do you set your distressors?
The attack, so on a DI, they're pretty much the same. Attack is around about 3.5. Release is around, same thing, 3.5. And the harmonic, the distortion is set to 2 because that's more of a even order harmonic, which is kind of like a square wave type of thing. Here's something for bass tone. Fuck if you have any kind of tube amps, or if you have multiple compressors, put a pair of headphones on and listen to the distortion. Because you put anything through, put a signal through any kind of hardware, you're going to get distortion. But you'll hear what the distortion, what kind of harmonic distortion is happening much better on a pair of headphones. It's not something to craft tone in. It's just something to hear, is the harmonic distortion on the upper end of the octave or is it more mid-rangey? Some people so when I'm doing a reggae record, I like it to be more mid-rangey because I know I'm gonna EQ the bass on the bass. It's gonna be thumpy. So remember how we were talking about the Hofner having that just the right amount of mid-range? If you are accentuating just based on whatever you're throwing it in through processing, if you're accentuating those harmonics in like the mid-range area, 500, 400, 600, it's gonna punch and it's gonna have that forward excursion right from the jump, in that area. Now, the distressor, so distortion 2 on the distressor, and I'm sure it's the same for the plugins, has this like growl, like around 100, 120, and also like up at like 2,500. So it's more like a kind of like what the jazz bass sounds like when you half tone the bridge pickup. So you play a jazz bass and you put the tone or the volume of the bridge pickup somewhere closer to like 5. So it's mostly
that's probably the only way I would ever play a jazz bass. Yeah.
Fuck yeah, dude. I knew I liked you. So like that's sort of what that kind of sounds like, and I love that sound. It's sizzly. Same thing with the I found the Unfair Child does that with just by being the Unfair Child. It has this like sort of sizzly, like slick distortion on the upper end. So if you send like a 50 cycle test tone through it, you'll hear it. And you could do that with you could do it with your plugins. In fact, I encourage people to do that. Like, if they're not working, if they're working in the box, it doesn't matter. The software is modeled after, it'll tell you where the harmonic reaction happens. And then that's how you build your chains and patches and shit. It's all tone. If you have a vocal that maybe needs to be needs to be more distinct because the character of the vocal or the microphone pairing between the vocal and the microphone have this certain quality that you like, instead of adding gain to it, I feel like it's a little bit more advantageous to have electricity do the work for you, so to speak. Right. And the same thing happens in the plugin. You send the test tone through at the frequency that you want to pick up, and then listen to how it morphs once you instantiate the plugin, and that's it may lend the tone. Some plugins are transparent, and that may not happen, but if you're working like the Helios plugins do. In fact, the first generation Helios plugin I think is much better sounding than that remake that UAD did, and I use that on guitars I just pop it in. I was doing it on vocals for a little bit because I just has this like mid-range fucking blop, and you put it in. I wouldn't even EQ with it. It's just like you put it on. It's like, oh, that's nice, and then you move. But anyway, yeah, that's the bass tone. It's nothing crazy. I really don't do too many crazy things.
Once it's compressed on the way in, are you compressing bass heavily afterwards in the mix, or is it kind of left alone?
It depends. I try to not, because I've learned that I don't actually like the sound of compression anymore. Like once I got the Ex Machinas, like I approach compression a different way. In fact, it took me like 6 months to sort of unlearn my compression practices because...
Yeah, expand on that. I'm curious.
Okay, so I used to like compression. In fact, I used to be this like pretty vocal about like why you shouldn't be afraid of compression. It's just tone shaping. Of course, it's managing dynamics, but it's also it gives it quality, right?
Sure.
And I also used to think that a lot of engineers that were working on like really popular records that were getting, that were doing like the mix with the masters thing, or like, they'd be on YouTube or something, and they just like, well, got to watch out for compression. Can't do this because then, the fucking police are going to show up, something, And it's like, and then like I went down the rabbit hole of like seeing how much accurate information, because I do this a lot. I talk on Twitch and, or I'll give like a seminar somewhere at a school or at a music convention or something. So I want to make sure that I'm giving the right information. So I do my homework. I'd like to think I know what I'm talking about, but I'm just, I'm curious to see what other people are talking about. And then I see that they're saying the fucking craziest shit. And I'm like, dude, there's nothing. So I became this like, sort of like, nah, you know what? Compression good. Compression can do no wrong. Just sort of as like a
mantra.
F you to people who are, sort of like hating on it for, and weren't explaining it properly.
Be careful with it.
Yeah. But then I got these Ex Machinas and I listened to a mix I did, and I'm like, oh man, I hear that compression. And like, these things will tell you if the forward excursion is there. Like, I need the forward excursion of music. I need it. Like, so I know that, like, the whole fucking glass wall effect, especially on drums with like, that compression can give is exciting. It's radio. It's for sure radio. But I guess I grew up listening to music. Most of my listening in my formative years was live music. I'd go to shows. I mean, I was going to concerts, because they were like $5 to get into a show, like for like local stuff. And even bad bands, you get the feeling of sound moving towards you. And that's what a speaker is, man. It's a transducer. It pushes sound towards you. And I want it to feel that way. These will tell you right away if you are over compressing. So I was like, okay, you know what? Before I panic, let me see what I can get away with. And I just started shutting off compressors. Compressor on that, compressor on this, backing off on my mix bus. And all of a sudden I started being like, okay, I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. That's cool. You know what I mean? And then I started really trying to, I guess, really valuing the capturing process more. It led to that. I mean, that's why I'm really passionate about these speakers, and I can't speak highly enough of them, because it's not just a way to critically listen. They've shaped my workflow, because I can hear things in a way that I'm just like, ugh.
That makes a lot of sense.
I don't know that's not what I intended. Now, if I intended it to be that way, I got no one to blame, no one to blame but myself. And I'll either have to defend my choice or, abandon it and reinvent. But this, I was not happy. I was not happy with the way it was sounding. So I was like, okay, if I want something compressed, I'm going to compress it on the way in. I know how I want it to sound. I could, I need it to be purposeful. I guess that's the main ideal, is purposeful, right?
Right. Don't just use compression because you can use compression. Use compression because you have a reason for using it. So whether it's you want that 1176 sound on the vocal, or it's because you just need to control the dynamics of that snare drum because it's all over the place, or whatever it is.
Yes. And I try not to think about it too much. I try not to get in my head. And that's another thing. The speakers were very freeing to me, because I don't want to think. I'm not saying if you get these speakers, you don't have to use your brain and it's just like, oh, it's on a great mix, because believe me, it took me a long time to learn how to use these the way that works for me. But now I'm at a point with them where it's just like, I don't want to think about, am I compressing too much? I want the thing to change. It's like when I was a kid with a guitar amp and I turned this knob, I heard it,
Yeah.
and I can match the sound in my head.
Yeah.
And I felt happy when I was doing that. And that's sort of how I treat compression. It's like, look, I don't care if a transient is going to be shaped a certain way, or if I have a sound in my head.
Right.
If someone's going to criticize my mixes, whether it be an artist or a listener or anybody, I want it to be a criticism of my taste and not my ignorance of how to work the equipment or my understanding of it, and that's how I like to use. That's why I still use gear, because the connection that I have with turning the knob. I mean, I do it with, plugs are cool too. It's all good. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but
it gives you joy to use the gear.
I like the sound, man. I like the sound. I like I like the imperfection. I think it gives purpose to the song. Also, just because the sheer physics of it all, if anybody understands an audio circuit and how an audio circuit works, it's adding more depth on the Z-axis because of that forward excursion that it lends itself to, because of electricity, just because of physics. So if you have the amplitude of your song pulsating in microdynamically, but also in a tempo, that behavior is what's pushing past resistance in the wires and the capacitors, in all the equipment that you have, and it's happening at a timed basis. It's fucking fascinating to me, dude. I mean, it's almost like it's a universe within itself. And I just did, so I gave a seminar at a music collective here in San Diego, and I was using a song that I mixed in the box. And obviously, at their studio at this place, they didn't have any, it was all in the box there. So I had to redo the mix in the box, and it was good. Like, in fact, the mastering engineer, who's a mastering engineer in San Diego, was there, and he was like, not bad in the box, man. Honestly, I can't really tell the difference. And I'm like, it's super fucking close. It's so close. But the thing, the 1%, 2% that isn't there, I can't really live without, because I miss it. Like, I just like it. Now, is it for every fucking genre of music? Hell no. Hell no. And that's the way I treat it. It's like, you don't have to use every tool for every job. It may be diminishing returns. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
I don't think that the ITB versus OTB fucking conversation is even just, it doesn't even matter, because it's like, on what? It depends on what it is you're talking about.
Right.
What it is that you're doing. Like,
I just did like a live live podcast recording with people on the air, with Andrew Murray and Jesse Ray Ernster, who are big in the pop mixing world.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, for pop music, the kind of music we're doing with lots of artists, really fast turnarounds, you never know how many deliverables you're gonna have to deliver, blah blah blah. In the box is just the way to go, and it makes the most sense.
To go.
But Andrew Murray was saying, like, listen, if that's not your thing and you love using gear, and then that's going to give you joy, and that's the artist that you're working with, and that's what you should do. Like, so it's just about what works for your workflow and the kinds of artists you're working with and the kinds of music you're working on and whatever it is, all that stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It's a business, at the end of the day.
Right.
And does your business rely upon fast turnarounds and, recalls at any given time? Is that the relationship that you have with your clients? Like, the relationship, it's pretty, with my clients, because they know I'm, I turn knobs and shit, and someone will be like, yo, I need this, that, and the other, I'm like, when you need it? And they're like, I need it, yesterday. And I'm like, not gonna happen, buddy. It's like, gotta recall it, dude. And that's but they know, I tell them, I inform them of this way. They know this, like, when they get involved with me.
Yeah, you're upfront about it all.
And I also tell them, like, what do you need? The way I'm not ignorant to the fact that I have to compete with, mixers that are mixing in the box, because people do value convenience, and I'd be silly to fucking discount that. So I've set myself up in a way here where I mix pretty fast. doing all this, like calibration for all this. I calibrate before every session. It takes me 5 minutes, I think. I've got it down to a nice little like technique to get it down pretty quick. I maintain it regularly. That's really how I get it to calibrate perfectly all the time. Is that it's regular checkups, maintenance, like the fucking.
Wow.
The company's like, they're probably tired of hearing from me because I call up and like ask them questions about shit, and they're just like, bro, you know it already. Like, how many times you want me to tell you about, the answer like all these dumb, like component questions, and but all this stuff is, it fascinates me. It does really fascinate me, but I have to make it work. And I would say that like, if it ever got to the point where it wouldn't work, I would, I still do in the box mixes. So I keep my rates low for, certain artists that, have a limited budget, and I'll do an in the box mix. And if I really, think it's worth it, I'll just, turn on my mix bus and run it through the mix bus. It doesn't take any, it takes 2 seconds. Right. But I'll make sure that all the deliverables like are talked about beforehand. And they understand. It's just like, look, I'll give you whatever you need. And if you're going to think you're going to need, multiple copies in the future, like, let's talk about it now.
Right. It'll be a different price point.
It'll be, totally different. Yeah, it's a different thing. But I understand, trust me, like, especially the pop guys, that's a hard life. I don't know if I was mixing a lot of like pop guys work. There's a lot of pop records made. And I don't know if, I don't even know, man. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would even miss it, dude, because it's really, I really think it's diminishing returns in certain genres. Because think about how pop music is made now. It's all sample based, it's computer based. There's no, other than vocals, what are you recording? Maybe a guitar, What are you recording? That isn't born in a digital realm. Honestly, like, I don't know if I'd want to send it on a round trip for what, harmonic. There are harmonic plugins that are very accurate. Acoustica stuff is incredibly accurate in terms of their harmonic distortion.
Yeah.
But Plugin Alliance has what is it? The black box. Kazrog. Is it called Kazrog? Is the True Iron I use a lot for that type of shit.
Yeah, I use the black box all the time.
Black box is great.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. Gets so much steps.
So I don't think that it's like a necessary thing. Can it make for a better song? I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that question. I would love to say yes. Man, this would be the best podcast in the world if I was like, fuck yeah, and this is the reason why I can prove it, and I can't do that. So sorry.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, none of this shit matters. It's all periphery, as I kind of like.
That's for sure,
distilled
dude.
From what you were saying of like it's all periphery to the song, and so.
Yep.
Yeah, it's about the music.
Yep.
So the hour is getting late here in Israel, so I'm gonna have to go to sleep sooner than later. So we gotta run over to the Saw segment and have a listen to what you're working on, and then we'll wrap it from there. So you sent me a track called "No Friend" by Agent Envy. So let's have a listen to that for about 90 seconds, and we'll chat about it.
Okay.
Sound cool?
Okay. Yes.
Turned a friend into
Yeah, Richie, this is super dope.
Thanks, man. Thank you very much. I
don't even know what genre
that.
it is. It's like somewhere between grunge and heavy metal or something.
Dude, that's the best
sure.
compliment. That's a great compliment.
It's got some Alice in Chains, some like Foo Fighters in it, but also some like Metallica or something.
You would make her very, very happy.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to tell her that. That's how you said that. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Sure. I'm just listening. Totally. And I love the vibe of just like that bass and the drums and the toms at the beginning. Like, I don't even know.
Thank you, dude.
Yeah, it's super cool. Super cool tone. Yeah, it's a vibe, man.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit what went into that song.
Wow, a lot went into that song. So that was actually okay. I guess we'll start from the beginning. The intro is actually a chopped and screwed loop that I made. So I had these like those toms. Those toms are from an old drum machine of mine that I had sampled. I owned a bunch of drum machines. I was like obsessed with collecting drum machines like fucking 16 years ago. It had nothing to do with music. I just liked drum machines, and then I'm not a synth guy. I don't like hooking stuff up with MIDI cables, and that's sort of I never caught that bug, thank God. Otherwise, I'd be homeless probably. So I sold all my old drum machines. I had like toy drum machines, but I sampled them before I did. The tom hits are these like just a drum pattern that I created using these. I don't remember which drum machine though. I want to say it's a Lin, but I don't think so. It was in a folder. I don't think it's a Lin, but it's similar. It's almost like a hollow tom sound that the Lin is sort of known for. And I just sequenced the thing, and then time stretched it. So I sequenced it at a certain tempo and printed it, and then time stretched the thing. But this I did in Ableton. Ableton has like this one of its warping algorithms, and I forget which one's not complex, because complex will give you something that would just sound like it was played sped up, maintaining its pitch. It could have been Beats. I think it could have been the Beats algorithm. So if you pull a warp marker, it'll granularize the waveform, and you'll get this sort of stutter. And I just can't, it reminded me, honestly, like I think I watched Fight Club, and it reminded me of something that was in Fight Club. And that's sort of her vibe. Like, just late 90s fucking, strung out, type of dark and sexy and fucking like you want to smoke a cigarette even though you don't smoke cigarettes. It's that type of vibe, And then I was just, playing around on the bass over it, and that was that part. And we wanted it to be sort of 9 Inch Nails-y, like sequenced, very kind of dark and spooky until the chorus hit, and then so that was that part. And I mean, she came with it. That's her vibe anyway. Vocally, she's very dark and like just like it's sensual, but it's also creepy, and like there's a lot of sauce there, like. So it was easy for me to just sort of get inspired by we've worked together a bunch of times. So I know what to expect, and that's sort of when I was producing this and was writing it, I was just sort of like, I know what I'm going to be met with, and I was like that kind of excited anticipation of it. So that sort of just guides my fingers or whatever. Honestly, I kind of lose it, consciously, and just sort of just like, oh, this is kind of cool, and then. I'll send it off. And that's how I know if I hit the mark or not, because if she came back with something that inspired her, like, and let's say, the lyrics were happy in nature, or it inspired her to do something that was a different vibe, the song could be cool. That could be a cool juxtaposition. But one of the things I use as like sort of a marker to know that I was on the right path was if the artist comes back with something that is in line with my original idea. So if I'm writing something sad and all of a sudden they come back with something sad, I'm like, good, I'm communicating, musically. This is now, if they come up with something happy, it could be rad, you know, and that also have to use my producer brain to be like, no, this is a great juxtaposition. This will feel good. You know, there's going to be nice contrast here, and I'll let it live. But like, I'll also take note that like, well, you know, I did write something that I thought was sad, and they came back with something happy. You know, you can't really, like I said, we can't really quantify human nature. So you got to account for that sort of thing. But that's sort of what I'll do. And in this case, you know, she came up with something pretty creepy, and like, you know, the song's about just being kind of like harassed, you know, like sort of like in a scary way, and dealing with it. And I was through the roof when it happened, because I was just like, this is great, because these lyrics fit, you know. It's ominous. It's like, it's daunting, you know, and it feels like a trek. It feels like I'm trekking to the chorus. Like I kind of want to get that, you know, the feeling of it, almost like exhaustion, because that's what, you know, when someone is being tormented emotionally by another person, you know, because of whether it could be a bad relationship, or, you know, even just even overhearing a bad conversation, you know, you're left with that sort of slime, you know, of negativity, you know, and you got to walk it off. That's sort of what it feels like during that verse. You want to, like, you know, trek through it. Yeah. And then that climax, and then, you know, it happens again, only, and it amplifies a little bit more. So that was sort of the vibe. The choruses are pretty straightforward. You know, there's drums. There's layers, a lot of layers of guitars,
and layers of vocals.
About 6 and layers of vocals. If there's something specific that you want me to point out, I don't know. You know, I'm happy to.
No, I mean, yeah, it just sounds great, man. Great work. Keep it up. If I wasn't so tired, I'd maybe go deeper, but I just woke up really early.
All good. It's all good, dude.
I'm pushing the candle here. But yeah, or late night out, whatever the expression is, I don't even have it anymore.
Yeah, burning the candle at both ends.
I'm burning the candle at both ends. That's for sure. At the stage of parenthood. But yeah, it sounds amazing. And yeah, this was just like a really inspirational chat. Like, I really enjoyed getting to meet you and hear about how passionate you are about music, and like really keeping the music and the artists in the forefront while you're working with them, instead of, you know, the things that seem important but actually aren't. And so it seems like you're on a quest for authenticity, and I think that's really dope. And I hope we all can find that, you know, for ourselves. But I can't let you go without asking the final question of the show.
Sure.
Which is, you know, just looking back on your journey, was there, and maybe I have an idea of what the answer to this question might be, but looking back on your journey, was there something you did or didn't do that you'd maybe want to impart on a listener who's more at the beginning of their journey, is like, yo, keep at that, you know, that's the thing that's going to get you where you want to go, or don't do that, this really held me back? What would be like that one nugget of wisdom you'd want to share?
Oh man, that's high pressure. Let's see. I think if I can give a piece of advice based on my own experience, it would be honest with where you're at in any given time of your, especially in the early parts of your career, or whether you're starting to learn, you know, be honest about where you're at. And what I mean by that is, track your progress, know where you are. Because if you know where you are, it's going to be very hard to compare yourself to other people, you know? So if you were, we were talking about like imposter syndrome earlier on, and like I suffer from that, because I know I like to talk a lot, and I like to give my perspective in hopes that I'm enriching the people that I'm talking to, especially artists that are looking to like learn. And I'm really afraid of giving them bad information. And the reason why I fear that so much is because I feel like there's so many, you know, more talented people in the world, you know, than me. Why should they be listening to me? That was something that like I developed early on, because I was so insecure of my spot in terms of where I was in my progress, because I was constantly comparing myself to not just my peers, but like fucking legendary, like, you know, record makers. You know what I mean? And here I am, I just fucking started out, and it's sort of like, it's such a waste of time, and you really lose the ability to create your own sound that way. You know, I feel like that's a really the best way to become successful whatever that may be. If your idea of successful is to be good, that's my idea of success. Just by the way, so if your idea is just to be good, the way to get good really quick is to become acquainted with your own taste, and let that guide you in terms of how you shape your music and your sound and how you help others. Right? Your taste is your biggest asset.
Yeah.
Trusting your ear is your biggest, and not your equipment. So if money's low, don't buy equipment yet. Wait till your client list gets up there, and then invest in yourself. You're worth it, but just be mindful of that. Because your biggest strength, no matter how big your studio or small studio is your taste and your ear, and how well you trust yourself, and how well you know yourself, and how honest you are with yourself. And you don't get that way by watching others. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So pay attention to yourself. I'll boil it down. Work like you're the only person that does your job. That's it.
Nice. Yeah, it's really important, and just being aware of yourself, and it also can help you enjoy your journey more, because it's like, if you're just constantly like, why am I not there yet? Why am I not doing that? Why am I not making those kinds of records? You're going to be miserable, and so you just have to realize that you're on this for the long haul, and you kind of gotta, you gotta enjoy that journey, and just say like, I'm not there yet, but I'll get there, and I'm enjoying this, and this is still good. And even if it's not, the level of my favorite artist, it's I'm still helping the artist I'm working with. I'm still getting better, and I'm still, providing something of value. So
it's a day by day thing. It all compounds, and like the fact that we even know
that's so
that
true.
we like what we do is a blessing. Like people go through their whole lives not finding something that they love. So if you love it and you're doing it, you just got 1 point, dude. You know what I mean? Like, and
that's so true.
Really relish that and grow on it. That's work like you're the only person that does your job. And you'll get great. That's what I think.
Perfect.
At least.
Yeah. I can't think of a better way to end this conversation. So, well, I'm gonna keep working.
Ben,
like
thanks
I'm the
so
only
much,
one
man.
doing it.
I appreciate you, dude. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you do this podcast too. I'm a listener, and I also don't want to leave without saying thank you.
Oh, sure.
Not just for having me, but thank you for doing it. It's really nice that you give the people who work in music a chance to talk about what they do. Because we're important, and I'm not just speaking for myself. I mean, everyone that chooses to make, I think, music for the sake of the enjoyment of others is very special, and selfless act. And what you're doing is very selfless, like giving us a chance to talk. So many thanks to you, dude.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, it's been an important part of my life for the last few years. So thanks for being a part of it. Yeah, totally.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Secret Sonics. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you've been digging the show, it would be awesome if you could share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend or two, and/or leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher of choice. That's it for now. Have a great week. Take care and dig in. See you soon. Bye-bye.